Good afternoon, I am Andrea Chisholm with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com. With Jamaica recording over 200 cases of COVID-19 since the start of the week, concerns are now being raised about additional measures to slow the spike. Prince Moore picks up that story.
There have been 120 new cases of the coronavirus reported in the last 24 hours, bringing the island's total to 1,732. Members of the Holiness Administration have continuously asked the citizenry not to panic over the high numbers. It was one of the issues raised in the first of 3 debates for the September 3 general elections. To that, the Jamaica Labour Party's Christopher Tufton said,
So the future, in response to your question, depends heavily on the expanded public health network through community health aides who are in the communities, working with people. Also, continue to expand the public health system so that when persons are positive, we can treat them. But very importantly, the focus has to be on prevention, and that involves all of us.
But for the People's National Party's Dr. Dayton Campbell, pre-testing will be a critical component in dealing with the present COVID-19 situation. He says every person arriving in the country will have to do a PCR test 72 hours before arriving. This suggestion was also made by the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association earlier this year. Dr. Campbell further promised that the People's National Party government would invest in more reliable technology to ensure that the geofencing mechanism, which is now in place, works more effectively.
What happens now is that with the geofencing technology, persons leave their phones at home and go out. And so what we have is increased exposure. We will ramp up testing, because what has happened is that there was a lot of excitement about testing at the ports, but you were not able to get back the result. As a result of that, you ended up with a backlog, and that made contact tracing almost impossible.
He says directives from the technocrats in the health ministry will be adhered to. This comes in the face of increased infections, which the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jacqueline Bisesa Mackenzie, has linked to celebrations over the Emancipation and Independence holidays.
The advice that was given about the Emancipation holidays was not taken by this administration. We will listen to the technocrats. We will ensure that we have increased community health aides to do the contact tracing. We'll mobilize volunteers. We'll ensure that the medical facilities are actually equipped and working.
Prince Moore, TVJ News.
And Clive Mullings, host of Radio Jamaica's Hotline program, has taken issue with comments made by Dr. Dayton Campbell in relation to COVID-19 and issues surrounding mental health.
If you can recall, we lost one Jody and Ferron whilst the JLP was busy campaigning in Southeast Clarendon. This was in the earlier part of this year when they should have been busy putting the measures in place. Mental illness is no joke. It is a serious thing. The fact that 4 out of every 10 Jamaican is affected speaks to the fact that even in this very room, there are persons who are affected. Certainly not over on this side.
Mr. Mullings says the comments are unbecoming of a political representative.
That the debate started off fairly well. At points, it really deteriorated.
It what?
Deteriorated.
Deteriorate. Why do you say that?
I speak specifically about Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
It was a low point, and he did not acquit himself well. I think that his reference to Ms. Ferron, the issue of mental illness, how that was handled poorly.
Yes.
And for me, he was very weak on the PNP side.
Meanwhile, both political parties clashed over plans to establish shelters for victims of domestic violence. The JLP has promised 3 national shelters to protect victims, but the PNP believes that's insufficient.
The Jamaica Labour Party administration promised to provide 3 shelters for victims of domestic abuse on 3 occasions. The first in July 2016, then in March 2019, and again in July this year. However, the party is yet to deliver on that promise. In its manifesto released on Tuesday, the JLP said the renovation of 1 shelter is expected to be completed by the end of August. On Tuesday night, at the first of 3 national election debates, the JLP's Kamina Johnson-Smith was questioned about the timing of the delivery on the promise made from 2016. Mrs. Johnson-Smith said there were challenges with the procurement process as the shelters have to be set up in an isolated environment.
They have to be in secret locations so that the women who go there are safe. Finding those locations in the 3 counties across Jamaica has been challenging, but we've achieved it. 1 will be open soon, 2 are being transferred, one is being transferred and 1 is in the process of renovation.
She declared that the party will deliver on its promise in its entirety should it win the general election on September 3. Mrs. Johnson-Smith explained that the shelters will be child-friendly, provide counseling and training for victims, especially those coming from challenging circumstances, to reassert themselves. But the PNP's Lisa Hanna doesn't believe that's enough.
I really don't think they're on the ground with Jamaican people and what they're feeling. What the PNP has done, we have been revolutionary in terms of helping and protecting women. The Maternity Leave with Pay Act, equal pay for equal work, we are the party with the women's movement. What the PNP will do, because you see when women are in an abusive situation, it sometimes is financial because they can't afford to get out of the home.
Ms. Hanna argued that a PNP government would provide victims of domestic abuse with a single income mortgage through the National Housing Trust so they are able to purchase a house of their own and get out of the abusive situation.
We know what it feels like. I don't think the Minister of Foreign Affairs understands it because she's been on a plane for just too long.
Thank you. At least one political analyst believes that the debate last night was lacking in information. In an interview with TVJ News, Shalman Scott said it was all promises without any idea of where funding would be coming from. O'Shane Masters reports.
Insufficient. That's how political commentator Shalman Scott has described the debates on social issues last night. He says the first debate was weak on substance.
What I saw coming through was like a replay of School Challenge where young people with ideas were putting them forward.
Mr. Scott says for him, the members from the PNP and the JLP were posturing rather than giving details on how they would fund their plans in the respective manifestos.
He wanted to hear what was going to be happening differently and how the poor economic state of our country was going to be ameliorated by some new approaches. And yes, we know that they are not doing an economic debate, but it was important for us to hear them recognizing that is not only to come and make promises, but that every thing in life has a source, it has a cost, and it has a destination.
He says it is critical for political parties to reveal what they will do to reduce the impact of corruption and cronyism. It comes against a backdrop of irregularities at a number of government ministries and agencies, including Petrojam and the Education Ministry.
The last 30 years, we have had so much corruption, and there is a statistic available that over $1 billion per year is lost to corruption and cronyism in the country. And so that's what we want to hear, not about how wonderful things have been and all the rest of it, but how we are going to be doing things differently. What sort of change in attitude is going to come? We are talking about the need for education in the public service. All those persons who have been responsible in the last 30 years for corruption and nepotism and had to resign are very educated people.
O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. We have many more stories when we return. Welcome back, and we're continuing the news. There are mixed reactions this afternoon from JLP supporters over the decision to stop traditional campaigning to limit the spread of COVID-19. Dwayne Anderson explains.
This was the scene in Savannah Lamar, Westmoreland over the weekend. Excited supporters took to the streets to greet the leaders of their party. Some persons wore masks, others didn't. Some persons spaced out, others reveled with each other. Now, incidentally, Westmoreland was the last stop of the public campaign this election cycle, as the parties both decided to stop the activities in the interest of public health. So we asked persons if they agreed with the decision to stop motorcades and the other type of traditional campaigning.
If I finish, we have to finish up the thing that we'd have to just do it and done. You understand?
No, I don't really think there should be a campaign due to the COVID thing and all that. A lot of these people, them not protect themselves and them not take the necessary precautions to protect others. So I don't really see the campaign thing necessary in a sense.
No, but we love a party, so you know we are going to come out in our numbers same way.
But for this supporter, the pandemic is not going anywhere, so the people must learn to live with it. It's for that reason that he opposes a clampdown on campaigning.
You know Jamaicans still, you can't control it. You can't control it because we're excited. And then the thing, you understand me, we're excited. We can't put off this pandemic and no pandemic.
Following a suggestion from the political ombudsman Donna Parchment Brown, the JLP and the PNP leadership agreed to engage voters by visiting their gates for the rest of the period leading up to the election on September 3. Dwayne Anderson, TVJ News.
Several parishes were shaken by a magnitude 4.8 earthquake this morning. It was felt at 7:28. The earthquake unit says the epicenter was located about 8 kilometers east of Mile Gully, Manchester. It had a focal depth of 24 kilometers. TVJ News received reports from persons in sections of St. Catherine, St. Elizabeth, St. Andrew, Portland, St. Anne, and St. James. Palace Amusement Company says it will resume operations today. Confirmation came from marketing manager at the company, Melanie Graham. The company closed its cinemas on August 22 due to new curfew hours, which affected regular show times. Ms. Graham says with the reopening, all cinemas will have one early show with limited number of auditoriums.
At Ligani, we will only be opening one auditorium, the bigger of the two. At Carib, it will be 3 that we're opening. Portmore, it will be 3. And at Multiplex in Montego Bay, 3. The times will vary slightly from Montego Bay because their curfew is a little different to what we have in this part of the world.
The company has implemented measures in line with COVID-19 protocols established by the Health Ministry.
We will have in place all the protocols that we had before, that we were given. And, you know, that we have all of these special MERV 13 filters that make sure that the air is clean. And before the show, what we do is turn on the fan part of the air conditioning and blow out all of the air inside the auditorium. So we have fresh air coming in, and then we close up and air condition.
In the meantime, Ms. Graham is appealing to patrons for their cooperation during the new norm. The motion picture industry has seen a global downturn with no predictable time frame for recovery. The Office of Utilities Regulation, OUR, has cleared the JPS of wrongdoing following investigations into reports of excessive billing linked to smart meters. The report, published late last month, found that JPS's new meters are performing satisfactorily. The OUR concluded that the new meters installed between January 2017 and June 2019 are not necessarily the driver of excessive consumption. JPS says it's pleased with the rating, which confirms that the integrity and functionality of the smart meters are up to standard. And it's now time for a preview of what's coming up in this evening's Health Report.
In the next edition of the Health Report, we'll look at COVID-19 vaccines.
Many institutions are now actively involved in phase 1 and phase 2 testing, and they're now moving into phase 3, where they'll test large percentage of the population to determine if the vaccines are safe and if the antibody levels are high after exposure to the vaccine. Because of the rigor required for vaccine testing, I do not see any vaccine be ready until about perhaps the middle of next year.
That's the health report this evening in Primetime News. And now for today's Healthy Living tip. Stay home as much as you can. Keep a safe distance. Wash hands often. Cover your cough. Sick? Call your health facility ahead.
Now to news overseas. Hurricane Laura has intensified overnight and is now on the verge of becoming a major hurricane. For the details, we join the CNN.
By the early afternoon hours of Wednesday, this could be a Category 4, approaches land with a Category 4 strength and possibly makes landfall as a strong Category 3 going in from late Wednesday night into early Thursday morning around southwestern Louisiana and southeastern Texas. But this sort of a category, Cat 3 to Cat 4, historically speaking, leads to devastating to catastrophic impacts on these coastal communities. You notice the coastal region here, storm surge forecast potentially exceeding 10 to 13 feet in some of these areas of southwestern Louisiana. And anytime you push water up about, say, 4 to 5 feet, water typically encroaches into a property, and then 9 to 12 feet, you can push a home off of its foundation. And unfortunately, this is going to be the concern for some of these coastal communities.
And in sports, the West Indies women will travel in September to England for 5 T20s in Derby, with one of the matches to be shown on BBC TV. There had been fears England would not play international cricket this summer after South Africa withdrew from their tour due to travel restrictions. However, West Indies will feature in the behind closed doors matches at the county ground. The series begins on September 21 with the third T20 live on BBC TV. That match on September 26 will be the first time international women's cricket has been on free-to-air television since the 1993 Women's World Cup. England beat West Indies by 46 runs to reach the T20 World Cup semi-finals in March in what was the last competitive outing for both teams. And that's it for the Midday News. I'm Andrea Chisholm. Join us at 7 for the Primetime News package. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, good afternoon.